What was that all about?
The year is 1998. Resident Evil 2 has just been released to much critical acclaim. As I mentioned in my Resident Evil 3 video, following up on this, Capcom began developing several new games across multiple console platforms. Starting out as an attempt to port Resi 2 to the Sega Saturn, our boy Shinji Mikami realised that this would not be possible without a huge sacrifice in quality. Wanting to still bring something out for Sega fans after this revelation, development began on an entirely brand new game. When Mikami wanted more time to develop this game, he was told it would need a better technical quality, and thus the upcoming Sega console, the Dreamcast, was chosen. Originally intended to be the true sequel to Resident Evil 2, this title was being worked on at the same time as a spin-off game featuring a new character attempting to escape Raccoon City. However, after that title was bumped up to main status and officially branded Resident Evil 3, this new game for the Dreamcast became a spin-off with a subtitle instead. Straying away from the previous entry's focus on an American city, this game was to be set on an island in the South Pacific Ocean and the continent of Antarctica. Code Veronica was designed to have a more gothic and European look and feel to it, with an attempt to move the story in a more gothic direction as opposed to the previous game's Hollywood style of horror. Mikami split the dev team up based upon their interests. For example, he allowed those that were interested in designing the guns to design all of the weapons in the game, and others who were just interested in environments were sent to gather photographs of old houses and castles. As it was meant to be the original Resi 3, Claire Redfield returns as the protagonist, looking for her brother Chris, who has been investigating Umbrella's shady activities since the events of the first game. Owing to the more powerful console abilities available to them, the pre-rendered environments of the past are now gone, replaced with real-time 3D environments allowing everything to be rendered in the same engine. The polygon counts for characters and enemies was greatly increased, especially during cutscenes, leading to a huge leap in facial animations. The zombies were also given upgrades as well, moving their jaws as they shuffle towards Claire, while making their eyes twitch while standing idle. The aim was to make Claire tougher than her Resi 2 appearance, having drawn upon her experiences in Raccoon City. By the time Resi 3 was released in September 1999, development on CV was drawing to a close. However, owing to much of Capcom's resources being tied up bringing Nemesis to the table, they had outsourced most of the 70-person team. Towards the end of development, Sega was even sending some of their own developers to help add finishing touches to the game. Only 5 months after Resi 3 dropped, Resident Evil Code Veronica was released in February 2000. Unfortunately, owing to the Dreamcast player base being much lower than the PlayStation's, an extended cut of the game was released for PS2 in 2001. This version, titled simply Code Veronica X, included roughly 10 minutes of brand new cutscenes featuring the return of a sinister villain and a few graphical tweaks here and there.
I still don't follow you. I really don't know anything about that.
It's time once again for that quick spoiler alert! Full story spoilers coming up for a 21-year-old game. If you don't want spoilers, you know the drill. Click the timestamp in the description below to skip out the story section. However, I highly recommend you do listen to the story this time around because it's absolutely batshit insane, makes no sense. This is probably one of the best descriptions you'll get of how the story actually goes, and you won't make heads nor tails of how it is. But if you still don't want spoilers, click the timestamp below. Right, they're gone. Okay, time to take some paracetamol for the pounding headache I'm going to have after reading all of this. In December 1998, 3 months after the tragic end of Raccoon City as seen in Resi 3, Claire Redfield is on a mission in Paris. She manages to break into an Umbrella-controlled facility. She turns out to be crap at this though, and is discovered by Umbrella security on site. After pulling some Matrix-style John Woo bullshit, she's eventually captured. Claire is detained on Rockfort Island, an Umbrella base designed for the training of the USS, the Umbrella Security Service, most notable for fucking up their mission in Resi 2 and introducing us to Hunk, and as a black site internment camp for spies, traitors and political prisoners who oppose Umbrella. She awakes to the sounds of a battle raging outside, and learns the island has been attacked by an unknown force. Released from her cell by a wounded Rodrigo, her prison guard, she learns that yet another goddamn T-virus outbreak has occurred on the island, and she once again has to fight to stay alive. Claire meets fellow inmate and absolute dickhead Steve Burnside, who from henceforth will only be referred to using naughty words. She is able to send a message to Leon S. Kennedy for help, and together Claire and Numbnuts explore the island looking for a way to escape, but are caught up in the twisted games of the island commander, Alfred Ashford, and his twin sister Alexia. Alexia is revealed to actually be the mentally unstable Alfred in disguise, suffering from a split personality disorder. The real Alexia has been in cryostasis since she was about 12, gestating the newly developed T-Veronica virus within her body after learning her and her brother were actually clones of their great-grandmother. Their father, Alexander, had created them as an experiment to test the Veronica virus and to make them super intelligent. I can't do this, you guys. It's just, oh my god, it's just so stupid. It's just, oh my god, I can't. Claire and Knobcheese escape on a plane after the base is set to self-destruct, because of course it is. But unfortunately, the plane crash lands into a base in the Antarctic, which conveniently has also suffered from a T-virus outbreak. Twat Features fatally wounds Alfred, and he releases the real Alexia from her 15-year stasis before dying and taking his creepy-ass laugh with him. The pair face off against Alexander Ashford, mutated into a horrific creature by his kids as a lovely Father's Day present, and attempt to escape the base but are recaptured by the now fully powered Alexia.
Meanwhile, deep beneath Monkey Island, the ghost pirate LeChuck ship lies anchored in a river of lava.
Having received the message from our boy Leon, Chris Redfield scales the cliffs of Rockfort Island looking for his sister. He meets Rodrigo, who is immediately killed, and proceeds to the main area of the base. Navigating the ruins of the island, Chris encounters Albert Wesker, his former STARS captain, presumed killed in the events of the first game. Showcasing some new superpowers that he just pulled out of his arse, he reveals he is looking for Alexia to obtain a sample of the T Veronica for his own purposes. Learning Claire and Alexia are at the Antarctic base, both Wesker and Chris find their own way there. Chris manages to locate Claire and free her, however Wesker's fight with Alexia spreads to the both of them, and he flees, leaving Chris to fight her. Claire is trapped in with the Knob Gobbler, who has been infected and mutates into another huge creature. He regains his humanity and attacks Alexia, but she finally kills him, much to everybody's relief. Chris faces down the heavily transformed Alexia and defeats her with the help of an experimental weapon. Wesker appears once more and fights Chris, but their battle is cut short, as again the self-destruct sequence has been activated. Chris and Claire escape Antarctica in a fighter jet and try to forget this whole goddamn story ever happened.
I didn't expect to find another living person left on this island.
So yeah, first thing to note here is the story. By no means is anything with zombies and monsters ever considered really grounded, but so far as Resident Evil stories go, the original trilogy was pretty much anchored, while this one goes completely off the goddamn rails. A spooky mansion filled with terrors or a city in the midst of a zombie apocalypse is nothing new in pop culture, nor was it back in 1998, but the OG trilogy managed to breathe a breath of fresh air into the formula. Stepping away from Raccoon City was always going to be a huge challenge, and while the setting is a great idea, the execution was a huge swing and a miss. The main story of previous entries was focused on survival and discovering the cause of the outbreaks and putting an end to them. This is true of Code Veronica, but the characters and environments you encounter are just truly bizarre. The idea is that Rockfort Island is a kind of clandestine black site prison and training facility for Umbrella soldiers, but it really feels like neither at all. However, exploring and making progress still feels just as rewarding as it always has done in the games that have come before. Even though this is the first Resident Evil to be released on what was then a next-generation console, it was being developed initially for the PS1. As a result, all the classic gameplay you're used to still carries over. Snap 2 aiming from Resi 3 is back, as is the quick turn feature, simply doable by pressing backwards and the run button at the same time, allowing you to get out of a tight spot. However, owing to the fact that this was developed alongside Resi 3, some of the quality of life improvements from Nemesis are actually missing from this game. Stairs once again now require you to press a button to ascend or descend them, yet zombies are perfectly capable of climbing them on their own. The most notable absence, however, is the dodge system. You remember that awesome ability that took a bit of practice to master, but once you got it right had you dodging fatal boss attacks and breaking out of hordes? Yeah, that's gone, meaning you're back to positioning yourself as far away as possible and just picking away at enemies before weaving through them. I understand why it's not present, it just feels like a step backwards, especially as Resi 3 was released 1 year prior. Maybe the dev teams could have communicated it a little better. One of the biggest differences, however, is the new engine the game is running on. With the Dreamcast and ultimately the PS2 being more powerful than the PS1, there is no longer a reliance on pre-rendered backgrounds. All the environments and rooms this time are all rendered in real time, meaning that all the enemies and items actually look like part of the world and not just positioned in them. This is used to its best potential when you enter a room full of corpses, not knowing if they're actually going to get up if you get too close to them. As a result of the real-time rendering, there's also a dynamic lighting system implemented too. Swinging light fixtures overhead will illuminate sections of the room the light is cast to, and really adds to the atmosphere and tension building. However, the over-reliance on it sometimes leads to many a dark room where honestly sometimes it's almost impossible to see what you're doing. The static cameras are back, but now they're a lot more dynamic. They will swing around and follow Claire or Chris as they move through corridors, but still cut off just at the right angles to hide what's lurking ahead of you, and it's one of the few things in this game that I actually really like. The usual suspects that make up your arsenal are all back in this game. Starting only with a knife, Claire quickly gets her hands on a pistol, a grenade launcher, and returning from Resi 2, the bowgun. The latter, however, having had a change of rules. Instead of firing 3 arrows to better deal with crowds, it now fires 1 bolt at a time directly in front of you in quick succession, which I found only really made it useful if you just wanted to save pistol ammunition. And as I found out by accident, you can load every single arrow you have into it, effectively giving it a huge magazine. The real use for it, however, is the rare explosive powder. Combine this with any spare arrows you've got knocking about, and you will get a small number of explosive arrows that explode on contact and are incredibly useful for boss fights. The grenade launcher also comes with its usual complement of varying ammunition, minus the freeze rounds from 3, and a new type of ammo called the anti-BOW rounds, specifically targeted towards boss fights. Chris starts his chapter with a pistol and a knife and can grab a magnum, but only if you remember one specific item from the start of the game. What? No boomstick, I hear you cry? Well, yeah, there is a shotgun in the game, however it's part of a really stupid puzzle in Chris's segment, which is over halfway through the game, and honestly I found it easier to just leave it until Chris was about to permanently leave Rockfort Island to grab it, by which point I had stockpiled all the ammunition for it and it had basically just replaced my handgun. There's an AK-47 up for grabs too, which works the same as the M4 in Resi 3, but the most notable new weapons to talk about are the dual wielders. There are a pair of machine pistols and a pair of submachine guns up for grabs, which when equipped and aimed will target 2 enemies at once. These weapons are great for clearing out rooms and cutting down enemy numbers if you're getting too overwhelmed. They also use the percentage bar method of ammo tracking, which makes them far easier to carry around and not have to worry about reloading. To further utilise their fancy new 3D environments, there's also a sniper rifle and a sort of handheld railgun known in-game as the linear launcher. Both these guns, when aimed, will go into a first-person view to look around, and fuck me if they're not the wonkiest pieces of shit to aim and use effectively. Couple that with the fact that you only get to use these during boss fights, and you're left waving the scope around frantically looking for the target like you're using a telescope in the middle of a mosh pit. Be that as it may, one of the biggest design flaws in my opinion is that these weapons are shared between both characters. Once you finish playing as Claire, Chris has access to absolutely everything she had stored in the item box, including weapons. Now Claire's section ends with a boss fight, and I don't know about you, but whenever I'm about to fight a boss in a Resi game, I'll stock up on all my health, ammo, and all of my most powerful weapons. Anything you had on Claire after this fight, she will keep on her and is locked out for Chris. Now, whilst locking out her weapons could have been an interesting mechanic a la Resi 2, it's really not, especially as Chris's portion of the game actually starts almost immediately with a boss fight, which if Claire was carrying all of your power weapons, you're left with just a pistol and a knife. There's no warning that you might potentially lose access to the grenade launcher, the bowgun, and any of the other weapons that Claire may have been using, and could softlock you at that part of the game if you are unable to defeat that boss. This isn't the only time you can be softlocked either, but there's more on that later.
I'm sending some company to keep you entertained.
There's not much new to shoot at here either. Obviously zombos are back in full force, as are the zombie Dobermans we've become accustomed to. Or would that be Dobermen? The hunters from Resident Evil 1 are back, this time summoned by these annoying little drones that sound off an alert and bring a hunter into the room if they spot you. And with the static cameras, it's actually quite difficult to see if you're going to be spotted or not. They come in a shiny new purple colour as well, with the ability to poison you, but they show up about twice and are more of an annoyance than a real threat. The only real new enemy type is the Bandersnatch, a yellow humanoid creature with one arm and the ability to whack you from a distance. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about them. They look like a rejected Ubisoft monster with the giant one arm and are a piece of shit to fight. They're like a Stretch Armstrong doll with their elastic limb and they can hit you wherever you are in the room. Honestly, they just suck. The bosses are pretty much a yawn fest too. The original Resi showcased that Umbrella was testing the effects of the T-Virus on multiple normal things to see what they could achieve. Resi 2 had you stalked by the Tyrant, and Birkin was constantly evolving as he grows desperate to track you down. Resi 3 had the excellent Nemesis encounters which could be avoided if you didn't feel like fighting, but he would still pursue you through different rooms and corridors and be able to corner you. Here you have a giant worm.
Tanya, it's a giant worm! They're sinking cities with a giant worm!
Some kind of electric salamander thing, and a giant spider. The latter two of which, I shit you not, I just walked away from without firing a bullet after I grabbed the item that they were guarding. Oh yeah, and there's a Tyrant. Do you remember in my Resi 2 video, where I said that the final fight against Mr. X didn't feel forced at all as he stalked you at every turn? Well, in this it feels very much forced. There's a cutscene a few minutes before he shows up, basically showing him show up, and then you fight him. Then you fight him again 5 minutes later. The last time you fight him, you battle in the hold of a cargo plane with the loading door down, making it clear one of you is going out for a skydive, and it's an awesome idea for a boss fight. It's just that he feels so shoehorned in just for the sake of having a tyrant in the game. They could have used the plane fight at the end of the game to fight Alexia or one of the other villain characters, and it would have worked just as well.
It's Alexia!
This isn't the only questionable design choice either. First up is Steve the Cockwomble. Supporting characters in Resi games are nothing new. Silent protagonists are great for putting you in the shoes of the character, and voice characters such as the ones in Resi can give you a good look into that character's mind and psyche. But your character needs someone to talk to, either to progress the plot or to establish their personality and motivations. Characters from previous games may have been slightly irritating, but you didn't have to deal with them as much as you do as this bag of dicks. He's a naive teenager with an annoying voice who spends most of his time perving over Claire. He claims he doesn't need any help from anyone as they just slow you down, and then immediately falls in love with Claire and will do anything to save her. Remember when Hideo Kojima really wanted you to ride in the Metal Gear Solid 2, but no one did because he was annoying and whiny and he did the old red herring switcheroo with Snake? Well, yeah, that's Steve. Every second he is on screen annoys the hell out of me, and I'm so thankful he won't be popping into any future installments of the series. On the topic of Claire, I'm not really sure what direction they really wanted her character to go in. Whilst doing research for this video, I found out the dev team wanted Claire to be tougher and more hardened than her appearance in Resi 2, so you get this bullshit intro where she's running away from armed guards and pulling off Matrix moves to kill them before she's captured, but as soon as you get into the game, she panics at the first zombie she sees and is often dumbfounded and acts like a complete idiot. In Resi 2, she was new to the whole zombie fighting thing, was far more competent and much more likeable. The villains are fucking weird too. Alfred and his split personality could have been a great plot device, but it just feels like an opportunity wasted. Alexia, when she eventually shows up, is just your standard run-of-the-mill overpowered bad guy whose eventual and inevitable showdown should be something epic, but it's just a bit boring. And apparently, if you read the documents in the game, Umbrella made her their head researcher when she was only 10 years old. No wonder they keep misplacing all their evil zombie viruses. The world design for this game is so messed up as well. I like the idea of a prison island and an army base, but fuck me if you couldn't even tell us what it's supposed to be. You start in an underground cell, which when you escape is for some reason underneath a random graveyard. Then there's a barracks, which is actually meant to be a prison building, complete with a torture dungeon underneath it. Atop the island is the army base, which just seems to be some random building. There's no armory, there's no barracks, there's no classrooms, just a random lab and a fancy bathhouse. Then there's just a random mansion for Alfred to live in, complete with a super secret bridge to another super secret mansion. And don't get me started on the submarine. There's a submarine which, when used, takes you clearly underwater to a base down there. Yet when you find the plane you need to use to escape in the underwater base, it's at sea level, despite you going underwater in a submarine to get down there. The Antarctic base is fine for the most part, looking like a factory, but deeper in it there's a complete recreation of the Spencer Mansion main hallway from the original Resident Evil. Now, I love hits of nostalgia just as much as the next guy, like little throwbacks like Leon's RPD outfit in Resi 4, but this makes no sense whatsoever. It's just there because they wanted to put it in there, and it's never addressed or brought up by anyone. Oh, and did I mention, I timed it, and it took me 51 minutes to get to the first save room with an item box in it. There are typewriters in the game before this, but there's no item chests, meaning you're lugging everything you don't need around with you for almost an hour. Lastly, the difficulty curve. Sure, it's a curve, but it's a reverse curve. The start of the game gives you so very little in the way of ammunition and harbs, and just expects you to make do. Some of the enemies respawn after you leave a room as well, meaning you could potentially waste all your bullets. I won't spoil what the boss actually is, but there is a boss late in the game that you cannot hurt and have to run from. However, he is faster than you and can kill you in 2 hits of his weapon. To effectively get past this, you need at least 2 full healing items in your inventory. Now, say you were unable to stockpile these early in the game and are completely fresh out by this late stage. Boom, you're softlocked. I mean, there are speedrunning strats you can learn to try and get around him, but if you're just casually playing this to get the Resident Evil story, you won't even know about these, or even how to pull them off effectively, meaning that your game run ends here.
Shut up!
So, to sum up, is Code Veronica a good game? In my personal opinion, no, not really. It's not a bad game, sure, but it's just not a good game. The immediate difficulty curve, boring villains, generic looking locations, and unimaginative boss fights really don't live up to the 3 entries we've already had. The upgrade to 3D rendered environments in this game is a really nice touch to showcase the power of what was back then the next generation, but the execution of all the ideas and creative processes feels lackluster and sloppily implemented. Is there anything I did like about Code Veronica X? Well, yeah, actually. The dual-wield weapons are cool. They're useful for taking out multiple targets at once if they don't all bunch up or just stand in a line. Wesker's reintroduction in the X release of the game is pretty cool. Comes completely out of the blue as he's not even mentioned in any of the games after the first, and making him the one behind the attack is a nice way of introducing him into the game. Having him and Chris face off multiple times over the course of the game effectively ignites their intense hatred of each other, which would go on to come to a head later on in the series. Oh, and remember in my Resi 2 video when I wouldn't shut up about the zapping system, where one character's actions would affect the other character's playthrough? Well, there's kind of one instance in this game. That Rodrigo dude is bleeding out from a gunshot wound and has run out of hemostatic medicine. Later in the game you can find some and it's completely optional if you return to give it to him. If you do, Claire also gives him her lighter and he gives her a lockpick in return, which you can use to open several locks in the military building as well as these special Duralumin cases. These can be found lying about in certain areas but can only be opened with a lockpick and contain some incredibly useful items. Not only that, but when Chris meets Rodrigo later in the game, he will give Chris the lighter back, which Chris can immediately use to gain access to a pair of submachine guns which would otherwise be inaccessible. One more thing is a couple of the puzzles. One early game puzzle has you needing to create a copy of a metal emblem to open the main gate out of the prison area. However, the emblem itself is behind a pair of metal detectors, requiring you to dump all of your weapons and metal equipment in a deposit box to create a copy from an alloy undetectable by the metal detectors. There's also good items in the room afterwards which you can't carry back through either, requiring you to try and find an alternate route on your return to get them back. It's a neat sequence that really got me thinking about how to solve it, and it only comes up once in the game, meaning it's not used over and over, which would make its concept get old very quickly. Late game as well, there is one puzzle requiring you to take 2 gems from the eye sockets of a tiger statue. Taking one moves the statue, making the other impossible to get. However, if you turn off the power to the facility, the statue remains static and you can grab both gems at once. And I really like the process behind that one, as it required you to do the complete opposite of what you had to do in the first place, which was turning on the power so you could access the room. Other than that though, CVX is a mess of ideas all jumbled together like some twisted marmalade. I know there is a lot of love out there for this game, and there are people making sacrifices to the Eldritch gods of old for a remake, but I just couldn't find space under its umbrella. Perhaps a remake would address and fix some of the many problems I have with it, but for now, I'm happy that this didn't end up becoming Resident Evil 3. Usually I talk about the music and mini-games, but the only tune that stuck with me was the save room theme, and the only mini-game included is just a series of rooms where you have infinite ammo and just have to kill everything. I don't really feel like there's much replayability to this, except to get the Magnum, which is completely missable if you didn't put the fire extinguisher, which you get right at the beginning of the game, into an item box, so you could use it at the end of the game to get the Magnum. There's a lot of good concepts and ideas here, but they just fail at the execution stage. Code Veronica is like communism. It sounds good on paper, but it doesn't quite work in practice. It was a bold experiment in taking Resi to the next level, it just didn't quite succeed. There are these zombies in one section of the game though wearing night vision goggles and they look cool as fuck, man.
Let's finish this once and for all!
And there you have it, guys. Resident Evil Code Veronica. Now, I know some of you were expecting Resident Evil 4. That one's on the way. Next up is Resident Evil 1 Remake. I'm very excited about that one because I absolutely fucking love that game. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. So yeah, this video took slightly longer than I thought it would to make because partly, as you probably know now from watching the video, I didn't really enjoy playing through the game, and it took me a lot longer than I thought it would to play through the game and record all the footage for it. That plus trying to make the background and make everything, and I didn't really want to be the one to point it out, but Claire's face is kind of weird on the right hand side of the screen there. Anyway, that's it from me. As always, thank you so much for sticking around and watching this video, guys. I really do appreciate all of you that stay to the very end and watch all of the video. A couple of outtakes coming up as a reward for you. Other than that, I have been PhilbertGreen. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe out there and be good, you guys. Catch you in the next stream. She manages to break into an umbrella control for there. She manages to break... I can't do this anymore. I can't. Oh fuck! Tripped over the cat. Dun 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 dun. Isn't that fucking Duke Nukem? Dun 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 dun. My cough reminded me of Duke Nukem's theme tune. Be that as it may, one of the biggest design flaws, in my opinion, is I'm getting the text.